most interesting thing to me thus far through 2 weeks has been something I'm going to call quarterback mayhem. We have this interesting quarterback landscape right now of first and second year starting quarterbacks, young cats, who predominantly are struggling, predominantly aren't living up to the level of play, the expectations of their fan bases. And then we have this curious group of veterans in their first or second years with new ball clubs in new cities who are very much impressing. So what I wanted to do is a quarterback mayhem metric, quote hands. I'm going to pick 4 young guns and 4 old bulls. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to rate my level of confidence in their play. Now, if it's good play, a rating of 10 means I have full faith that they'll actually get better. 1 being there's no way he'll regress. It's not who he is. And if their play is poor, on the flip side, a rating of 10 means I'm fully confident that his play will improve. He'll get better and drastically so. And a rating of 1 means this is who he is. He's not good. His team's doomed. So let's go back and forth. Let's flip-flop between young quarterback and old quarterback. Which means we have to start with a difficult conversation about Bryce Young. Difficult if you're a Panthers fan, but even harder if you're someone like me who considers himself a draft nerd, a draft buff, who thought Bryce Young would be special. Bryce Young has a head coach, Dave Canales, who is unfit simply to be a head coach in this league. In addition to a backwards culture, terrible supporting cast, which we'll get to in a second in terms of weapons, Coach Dave doesn't have the experience, the ingenuity, and the offensive creativity to be a good head coach in this league, let alone a head coach in the first place, right? You look at his 1 year, a single year of offensive coordinating experience with the Bucs. That offense was 25th in yards per game and 20th in passing yards. The only reason why I think he got a head coaching job in the first place is because Baker Mayfield had a revitalizing year. To be honest with you, though, that had much more to do with the weapons. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, great offensive line. The first time he really had a sound situation than it did Coach Dave. So that's first and foremost. And I bring up Coach first because I think the most important thing for a young quarterback's development is the relationship with a young, offensively gifted mind. Then you move on to the lack of weapons. Last year, Carolina had PFF's 25th rated offensive line. Not good. His weapon core, Jonathan Mingo, rookie, notorious draft bust DJ Chark, and a 33-year-old Adam Thielen, who had good stats, but frankly, it was because he was force-fed. It's the only guy that Bryce had. They had a full offseason, 4 months, to put some gold in a completely barren treasure chest. What do? They trade for Deontay Johnson, who's good, but he's not a 1. He's not one of these physically imposing weapons that make life easier, that make a rookie quarterback better. They draft Xavier Legette in round 2, who's a physical freak, but in a historically loaded draft class at that position, he was the most raw. Everyone knew he's not seasoned enough yet. He's not crisp enough yet to contribute from day one. And yet they chose to draft him when Bryce Young was in need of the exact opposite, a guy who can contribute right off the bat. Because of this terrible deck of cards, what you see is what you get with Bryce Young thus far. What you reap is what you sow if you're Tepper and the Panthers organization. Now, I see a very similar trajectory to Bryce Young's career than Sam Darnold has had, a guy who we'll see later on this list. A guy who, by the way, him and Baker both were ran out of town in Carolina because of the same backwards culture that Bryce Young's had. Now, Sam in 2018 and 2019 with the Jets, bad culture, defensive minded head coach, bad offensive line in 2018, Jets ranked 25th by PFF, bad weapons, Robbie Chosen and Quincy Enunwa. In the stats, the level of play on the field bared out true in a very similar way for both Sam and Bryce Young while they were young, while Bryce is young. Sam threw for 17 touchdowns, 15 picks. Bryce Young threw for 12 and 10 in their rookie years. The yards, the exact same. Sam threw for 2,865 to Bryce's 2,877. The Jets didn't improve their weapon core significantly enough for Sam from year one to year two as well, and they brought in a bad coach, Adam Gase. The poor deck of cards, bad culture, bad coaching, is what set Sam back, is what caused him to ride benches for 4 or 5 years. But because of Sam's natural skill, because of his resilience, his moxie, he was able to get better. And now, finally, in a good situation with the Vikings, we see the fruits of that blossoming. We see a guy that's playing very well. I see a similar thing for Bryce Young. My rating is at an 8, that he will eventually start in any capacity for a team that's in need of a quarterback. My level of faith that he will one day be a franchise quarterback like Baker, have that unprecedented bounce back, is at a 5. Look, I think for a guy who was a Heisman winner, for a guy who was a first overall pick, who went to a franchise starving, a fan base starving for a winning product on the field, to walk into this terrible of a circumstance must be crushing, must be so much pressure and so anxiety provoking. I think it's much more situation than his natural skill, than who Bryce is as a person. I'm rooting for him. I think he will one day prove this is not who he is. Interesting side note, too, with Tua's uncertainty, he already said he's not going to retire. But let's just say he changes his mind. Bryce Young to the Finns would be interesting, right? Incredible weapon core, incredible young offensive coach, and now a culture that's geared towards winning, the exact opposite that Bryce had in Carolina. And I think he would have a lot of success, right? Accuracy, timing, decisive. That could be a cool spot. Keep your eye out for that conversation to begin. Hopefully it does as a diehard Finns fan. I think Bryce would be excellent in this scheme. Let's move on to Derek Carr. This is a guy who I had ranked last as a starting quarterback, 32nd coming into this year. Boy, was I wrong. And I'm happy that I was wrong. The primary reason to Derek Carr's success that I think will not only persist, I think Derek Carr can even improve upon what's been a good level of play thus far, is Clint Kubiak, their OC. He's cooking. This is a really multiple offensive scheme, one that threatens every area, every aspect of the opponent defensively. And it's one where it uses the talent that the Saints have to the fullest. Shaheed's deep speed, Olave's savvy route running, Kamara's well-rounded ability at tailback. Short, middle, deep, the Saints offense has it all. Derek Carr has thrown to 10 different weapons this year. In all of 2023, he threw for 11. That's insane. And that says it all. Also, a very much improved offensive line for the Saints. All of this accumulates to a totally opposite Derek Carr this year than a Derek Carr last year. I'm confident I'd put that at a 7 or 8 that Derek Carr can continue this type of play. And I actually think he's played well enough. I think the Saints offense is good enough for the Saints to win the NFC South, to win a playoff game. Derek Carr, props to you, man. Let's move on to AR-15. Going back and forth here, old bull to young cat. It did not look pretty in Green Bay. Putrid play. 3 picks, 1 fumble. Just looked young and inexperienced, and he has so in what's been a very up and down career thus far. But guys, he is young and he is very inexperienced as a player. Interesting stat. He has 19 total starts in college and the NFL thus far. Every other first round pick, or I should say, every first round pick from this year's class played more snaps while they were in school at the same time as AR-15 than AR-15 played. They started more games in 21 and 2022. Let me pull this up. Jaden Daniels, 27 starts. Bo Nix, 23 starts. C. Will, 25. Drake May, 18. Michael Penix, 18. Richardson, 13. Unprecedentedly raw as a pro at this age. All of that's to say, I trust in Shane Steichen, his head coach. The guy who developed Herbert. Herbert's best year as a pro was with Shane. A guy who developed Jalen Hurts. That Super Bowl run, Steichen was his OC. Steichen developed a Jalen Hurts that no one believed in. Steichen is legit. I think he can do the same thing with AR-15. And especially when you look at the supporting cast. Great weapon core, Micah Pittman, A.D. Mitchell, who was my 12th overall prospect despite position in the draft this past year, fell to the 2nd round. Alec Pierce suddenly looks good. Top 5 offensive line. I trust in that. Primarily, I trust in Richardson's freakish skill set. And I think he has enough poise. I think he has enough intangibly in the tank for him to improve. My quarterback metric confidence level for Richardson to improve this year is at a 10 because, frankly, Steichen is too good of a coach and Richardson has played too poorly to continue playing this bad. And I think Steichen will adjust. He'll use his legs more. He'll be on the run more, less in-pocket play. For Richardson's future as a pro, Steichen's staying put. This offensive line is relatively young. Weapon core is young. I'm going to put my faith at a 10. I think Richardson develops into a very good starting quarterback, one that can win playoff games. AR-15, I'm confident. Let's move on to Justin Fields. Don't look at the stats for Justin Fields. Look at the threat he poses. Look at how defenses play Pittsburgh differently compared to the many years of having a stationary, mundane, bland quarterback in Pittsburgh. The extending plays, the creativity off script, the legs, the use of his speed to create passing lanes. Guys, it's not like Justin Fields has had that much time to throw. 28th out of 33 in terms of time to throw in the league thus far. And besides Pickens, it's not like he's throwing to great players. Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin are Pittsburgh's 2 and 3. Yet, Fields is 8th in PFF grade thus far, a completion percentage of 70%, a rating of 94, He's looked really good. Encouraging that he's playing it safe with the ball, hasn't turned the ball over this year. 0 picks. And this is exactly what I thought Fields' play would be with Pittsburgh. This is why I said, don't start Russ, start Fields. With the Bears, defensive bad head coach, lack of weapons, no culture, no offensive line. In fact, you could make the case that you could put him in that Bryce Young tier of historically poor conditions as a young quarterback, that Darnold tier. Fields has greatly impressed thus far. I trust that he will continue this level of play throughout the rest of this year. In fact, I actually think he'll improve. It's not like he's played out of his mind, but with a good offensive line now, with great head coaching and culture, Fields will only get better this year. I'm going to put my faith at an 8 for this year. And for his career, if he stays in Pittsburgh, if the staff stays intact, I'm going to put my faith at an 8 too. Like, I think he'll be pretty darn good. And I think he'll continue to be pretty darn good. I'm really proud of Fields. I'm happy that he's good. Shout out Fields. Let's move on to C. Will. Playing for Fields' former team. It hasn't been pretty. 56% completion, 53 QBR, 133 yards per game thus far, 2 interceptions. In what's been not a bad situation on paper for him. Like, this wasn't a terrible setup. Don't like the coach, but they greatly improved that treasure chest of weapons. Allen is out, yes, but Moore and Odunze is a pretty good 1-2 punch. In theory, this is a good offensive line, although he's 29th in terms of time to throw, 1 less than Fields. The biggest point I can make on C. Will, the knock on him, the concern coming out of USC was this guy holds on to the ball for far too long. He believes in his epic skill set a little bit too much. Makes errand throws. Bad decisions because he doesn't know when to call it quits. He doesn't know when to take that check down, when to throw it out of bounds. And it's a recipe for disaster given the fact that he's had little time to get the ball off. The biggest thing moving forwards for C. Will, therefore, is developing that IQ, developing the awareness to say, I'm playing in the NFL now. I can't just hold on to the ball for however long I please because I have a sick arm and pretty good legs. I believe he will. I don't think that happens this year. I put my faith at a 6 that he'll improve upon this poor play. He can't really get worse. He can only get incrementally better. For his career, I still have faith. I put that at a 7. I trust in the skill set. I think when Keenan comes back, life will be better and his development will really start. But the Bears have to move off of that coach. They have to get one of those young offensive minds that C. Will can develop with and develop because of. And for his sake, I really hope they do. Because if not, yeah, I do think his career will go into a different path, a worse path. C. Will, very shoddy. I am relatively faithful still in his future. Like I said, though, he has to learn that he's playing with the big boys now, has to get rid of the ball, can't hold on to it for 5 seconds. Let's move on to Sam. Darnold, incredible bounce back. Like I said about Bryce Young, You can't walk into as bad of a deck of cards, be dealt a shitty hand, and expect to have a good career as a quarterback. It just doesn't happen much. This is the first time that Sam's had a good culture, good head coach, good offensive line. And the fruits of that are paying off, right? We're finally getting the ability to see the moxie, the arm strength, the play strength, and the toughness that we loved about Sam at USC. By far the best play of his career with this Vikings team through 2 weeks. A rating of 111, 476 yards, 4 touchdowns. That throw to Jefferson says it all. KOC makes life easier for his quarterbacks coming from that McVay coaching tree, and we're seeing it. I have my faith with Sam at an 8 for the rest of this year. I think he can actually get better. I think he's just now gelling with this supporting cast. And for his career, McCarthy will come back, but the truth is he may play well enough this year to continue starting for the Vikings. McCarthy could be on the bench for a couple more years. That's a conversation I think the league isn't ready for. Vikings fans aren't ready for, but it will happen. Mark my words. My faith in Sam, if he can continue to start somewhere, maybe it's not with the Vikings, but somewhere else, is a 6. I think he'll continue to be a good starting quarterback if given the chance. Could be similar to Shake and Bake, who we'll see in a second here. Awesome for Sam. Awesome for the Vikings. Will Levis. Back to these young cats. Won't take too much time here because, look, second round pick, we didn't really have expectations going in to begin with. What I will say, he's been very up and down, had a mildly impressive rookie year, 8 touchdowns, 4 picks at Dolphins comeback on Monday Night Football. He was able to display some of the off-script ability, the mobility, the athletic prowess. The problem with Will this year, he's too reckless. He's feeling too much pressure to perform and succeed because he knows he's on the hot seat. He knows he's a second round pick. He has to perform better than those high first round draft picks in order to keep his job. And do I believe he can? Not really. No. My faith in him to improve the rest of this year to lead the Titans to a respectable season is at a 6 because I think, like many of the quarterbacks on this list, it'll be hard pressed for him to get worse. Now, projecting his career outward, I don't know if I trust in him. And I think the Titans, like I said, have a short leash. I'm going to put that at a 3.5. I don't know if he will be a starting quarterback in this league. In fact, I expect that he won't be. That's Levis. Now for Mayfield. Almost done with this list here. Guys, this is unprecedented. This just doesn't happen much. To bounce from team to team, to be in such negative media spotlight for years as a developing quarterback in the toughest professional sports league in the world, potentially at the toughest position, and then to come to a team finally like Sam in a good situation, best supporting cast he's ever had, through 19 games with the Bucs, 33 touchdowns, 11 picks, 3 games above 500. Just a very impressive career reboot. If you look at what he's doing, he's playing within his means. He's playing to his strengths, decisiveness, moxie, accuracy, some off-script playmaking. My level of faith that Baker will continue this type of play is at a 10. It really is. I've always liked him. I've been in the Skip boat, the one guy in sports news and sports talk that's always been positive about him, that's always believed in him through thick and thin. I think this guy's a very good quarterback. You could make the case he's been a top 10 quarterback through the last 19 games. A very strong case. I think Tampa Bay is in prime position, can really win the NFC South. And this is a Tampa Bay team. First of all, this is a quarterback who's won a playoff game now, won multiple playoff games, but with Tampa Bay, since playing well, he's won a playoff game. And it's a team, believe it or not, they've made the playoffs 3 straight years. You wouldn't think about it, but Tampa Bay has been the champions of the NFC South in recent times. An underrated, under-talked about team and an underrated, under-talked about career reboot from Mayfield. Really happy for him. Let's move on to Bo Nix. No touchdowns and 4 picks through his first 2 games as an NFL player. That's bad. What makes his situation worse? Not very good offensive line, not a good weapon core at all, relatively to what other quarterbacks have in this league, especially the successful ones. And a head coach in Sean Payton, who, yeah, we all know what he did with the Saints. We all know the X's and O's mind. But at the same time, you could make the case that this is a very different league now. Defensive schemes have adjusted to the air raid, to the dominant passing games. This isn't looking good for Bo Nix. The potential may or may not be there. We knew he was one of the more limited quarterbacks in the draft class this past year. What I trust with Bo Nix, though, I loved the amount of career starts in college. I loved the resilience to have pretty poor play, to be ran out of Auburn, and then to go to the Ducks and have the level of success that he had. That takes grit. He's a culture guy. He's lived in the South and the Northwest now. I trust in Bo Nix, the person. Do I trust in the situation or the natural football skill set that he has? A lot less now than I did on draft night, I can tell you that much. Level of faith in Bo Nix to become a good starting quarterback in this league would be at about a 5. Too soon to say. Average faith. Leaning towards probably not. This year, can Bo Nix be a good QB? No. Can Denver be a good team? Probably not. More than likely, this is a 4 to 5 win team than a 7 or 8 win team. A regression for Peyton and the Broncos. Lastly, Kirk Cousins. Much improved from week 1 to week 2. A lot of concerns there in week 1 against Pittsburgh. Granted, a very tough Pittsburgh defense. The 2-minute drill proved last night in a game where he didn't exactly play great for the majority of that game, but the 2-minute drill proved, okay, this guy is still a good QB. This guy is capable of winning games with the Falcons. But what's evident as well, for a guy who was already athletically limited, he looks a little bit worse. He looks a little bit more stiff. From a movement standpoint, he looks incredibly old. And as a quarterback, through 2 weeks with a new team, no doubt he will improve. Confidence level a 7 in Kirk. He's not the same Vikings quarterback, I can assure you. But it's not like he's suddenly bad now. He's good enough for the Falcons to seriously compete for the NFC South. He's good enough probably to win a playoff game with that level of defense that they have. I just don't know if he's a top 15 quarterback like he once was in the recent past. So that's Kirk, and that is the quarterback metric, Mayhem. God, that was fun.